Okay, so we are now going to discuss on how are we going to work with a header detail, or otherwise also known as the master detail form. So what is a master detail form? By the way, in our previous videos, we have worked only with single tables. For example, I'm going to save on TBL users. Okay, so we are dealing with a single table. How about if ever we're going to save, okay, at one submission? Okay, for example, here when I click on submit, we are going to save to more than one table. Okay, so in this example that we have is we have two tables actually that we are going to work with. Okay, in the header and detail form. An example for uh, let us say an application for a header detail form is actually an invoice. Okay, so we have here the header. Here is we have the invoice number, the P no yes, the PO number, invoice date, and so on. Okay, so normally the header contains the individual values about the whole invoice. Okay, and the content of this invoice then would be our detail. And as you can see, we have example here, we have an item description, then the cost, quantity, and the total. So you have cost times quantity, so you have here our total. Okay, so this one here are the columns or the table for the header, and here is the column or the table for the details. Okay, so uh, in our example, okay, so we are going to work with, okay, I have created actually a new project. Okay, so we are going to create an invoice. We're going to save into an invoice for a hospital application. So concentrate on these tables here. Okay, so we have the invoice master or the header. Okay, and we have the detail. Okay, and in our invoice master, it contains a primary key. Okay, an auto increment column. So this is a number. Okay, then we have the patient, okay, who purchased these medicines, because our detail is actually medicines, then the invoice date and the total. Okay, and we have the lookup table for the patients. So we have here now the patient ID is a foreign key from the TBL patients. Okay, then we have the details, okay, which contains an auto increment, okay, column, then a foreign key for the invoice ID. Okay, we're going to go back later on with this one here. Then we have the medicine purchased, and this is actually a foreign key from the TBL medicines. Okay, so our medicine contains our name of the medicine and the price. Okay, then the quantity, the price, and the amount. So quantity times price, we have our amount. Okay, never mind the teachers here. So let's go back to the foreign key invoice ID. Okay, so take note here that the invoice ID, the primary key here, is going to have its value only when a record is going to be added. Okay, so we do not know actually the value of the newly added value. Okay, and that would be then the value for the details. Now, if ever we are following a set of numbers, for example, our POS or is registered with the BIR, so they are going to give us a range of numbers that would be used by our company for our invoices. Okay, so we have no problem with that. We could put an invoice number here. Okay, and that could be then our primary key. Okay, but how about in our example here? we have no invoice number. Okay, so we are just going to be dependent on the auto increment value here that is going to be our foreign key into our invoice detail. Okay, so take note, if ever we have an invoice number from the BIR, so therefore we have a predefined value for the number, so we have no problem with our foreign key here. But in this example that we have, we don't have a value for this, and we do not know the value of the next auto increment value, and that would be going to be used in our foreign key here. So I'm going to show you an example in, okay, I've created an Excel file. So I already have one header here, then we have two products related for this one here. So this one is actually the foreign key. Okay, this is our foreign key, and this is our, in our header, this is our primary key. So therefore, the first invoice here contains two details. Okay, so next is, for example, somebody's going to buy, let us say, pitok. Okay, then same date. Later on, we're just going to have the total. Okay, so then we're going to add shampoo, candy, and cell phone. Okay, so never mind those. Now, the problem here is, what should be our value here? Okay, so the value for our foreign key here will depend on the primary key here, and it is going to have its value only whenever a new record is going to be added. So we are going to add first. So the technique here is, we are going to add first, okay, on the header table. So we could then have, since this is an auto increment, so it is going to add 1 to the previous value. Then after it has been successfully added into this table, then we are going to retrieve this value. Okay, so we are going to get that, then that's the time that we are going to assign that value here. Okay, so that's the difference now of an auto increment primary key used as a foreign key in other table. Okay, so we're going to wait that this is going to be added first before we could add anything onto our details table. Okay. So I have here a new database, by the way. I have DB Hospital. Then never mind the other tables, because again, as I've said, I have used this in my quizzes on my previous subjects. Now, so we're just going to concentrate on patients, medicines, invoice, master, and the details. Okay. So we have here, again, as the sample is, we have this one here. For example, I'm going to select David Sof Gabunario. Then for the date, so we have here now our header. Okay. And the total later on. Okay. Then we have here our quantity. I'm going to add. Then I'm going to have diet tabs. So automatically it added into our table. Then let's say 3 new zip, and it also automatically added for the total. Okay, so the total should be part then of our header. Okay, then we have here our medicine, the quantity, the price, the amount for our details. Okay, but what I want you to take note is into our detail. By the way, this is our invoice detail. Okay, so we are going to save only, okay, the invoice ID, again, which comes from, the invoice ID comes from this one here. Okay, and the medicine ID. The medicine ID is going to come from the TBL medicines. Okay, but what you could see here is we have the name of the medicines. Okay, then we have no problem with the quantity, price, and amount. Okay, so I'm going to show you later on how are we going, instead that we are going to save the name of the medicines, we are going to save only their IDs. Okay, so we have here our medicines. Okay, the medicines table, then the patients table. Okay, so we have it here. Okay, so after selecting any or as many medicines, then just click on submit, and it is then going to save the header and detail, okay, into our database at the same time. Okay, so we have here our code. Okay, I have already created, so I just left my submit, okay, as blank, just because this is the only news so far that we are going to discuss. We have already discussed the other things. Okay, so the very first thing that is going to happen is that okay, we're going to start at the top. Okay, so I'm going to use Axios, then use state and use effect. Okay, then okay, I'm here in the invoice now. We have patients list and medicines list. Okay, so I've created here two lists. Why? Because we have here for the patients list and we have here for the medicines list. Okay, then we have the variables, the state variables for my header. Okay, I have the patient ID, invoice ID, and the invoice total. Okay, so as you can see it there, so I'm going to get the ID of the selected patient, then the date for the invoice, and the total for the invoice. Okay, so I have also here the variables, the state variables for my details. Okay, so you have the medicine ID, quantity, price, and amount. Okay, so even though I have here the name being displayed, but take note, what we are going to save is actually only the medicine ID. Okay, then we have the details list. The details list is the list that is going to be contained into our table. Okay, so those are our variables. Okay, so first is we have our side effect at page load. Okay, so when the page, as you can see, how would you know it is page load? So we have here blank for our dependency. Okay, so we have here get patients and get medicines. Actually, we could, this is not advisable that you are going, at start you are going to have 2 round trips to the internet or to your server. But anyway, when we are going to optimize our codes, I'm going to show you how are we going to do it only once. Okay, so get patients is we have here. Okay, so get patients is we have patients.php. By the way, I have created here hospital, then okay, we have here get, what was that? Is it patients? Okay, patients is we have here are patients. So get patients is we have here. Then just like before is we have select asterisk from. So everything is going to be returned. So all patients will be returned. And as you can see there also we have our get patients. And by the way, I just left my JSON as blank. Although we could create here, we could validate it here actually. Okay, but as of now I'm just going to have it JSON because it needs JSON here. Okay, we have it here. So I just pass blank JSON, but anyway we have no problem with that. Then we have set patients list. Okay, so when we have the set patients list, so therefore it is the returned records. Okay, so meaning the patients list has been updated. It's on here. So once the patients list has been updated, the state has been updated. Okay, so we have here the select element for the patient. Okay, so we have it there, patients list that map, then the patient. So we have here select statement, then inside the select is we have different options. So I created the patient ID as our value for each of the options, and what is displayed is we have here our name. Okay, so that is why we could see it here, the names of our patients. But every time that I'm going to click on any of the items here, we have here the on chains. Okay, so on chains, it is going to change or set the patient's ID of the newly selected item from our select element. Okay, so that would be then the value for the header variable, the patient ID. Okay, then we have the invoice date. Okay, we have here our date. Okay, type is equal to date, and the amount later on. Okay, so next is we have get medicines. So into my get medicines, it only access the API endpoint medicines, and we have it here, medicines. Then we have get medicines. Okay, so the operation there is get medicines. So meaning it is going to retrieve all medicines ordered by medicine name. Okay, and once it has been retrieved, so it is then going to update our medicines list. Okay, once our medicines list has been updated, so we have there medicines list. Okay, so once it has been updated, so it is going to update also here the select element that is going to contain the list of medicines. Okay, so the value would be the medicine ID, then maybe there the medicine ID, and the display option is we have the medicine name. And once it is going to be changed, or the user is going to select for an item or medicine, it is going to set the new medicine ID with the ID. Okay, set medicine ID is a bit here, so that the medicine ID will be changed. Okay, and this actually contains a row into our details. Okay. Okay, so those are the use effect. Then we have the date. By the way, for the quantity. Okay, for the invoice detail, we have the quantity, select statement for the medicine, and I just created a label for the price and amount. Actually, you could forgo with this one here. Okay, so I have here the price and the amount. So where are this price and amount? So we have defined them here. Okay, as the state variable for our details. Okay. Okay, so hopefully I'm still okay. No error. Okay, so next that we are going to do then is the user is going to select for the header, select for the patient, the date. I have no validations here, so take note. Then select for the price and take note of the events that are going to follow once the medicine is going to be changed. Okay, when I'm going to click on Viagra, what are the events that are going to execute next? Click. So it gets the price. Okay, it computes for the amount, that is quantity times the price, and added that record there, or that row, into our into our details. Okay, so the click on any of the items here will trigger the update on the status or state of the medicine ID. Okay, so that is why I have here a side effect, okay, for the medicine ID. Take out, I have here the dependency as the medicine ID. So meaning, if ever the medicine ID is going to change, it is going to execute all of this. Okay, so I have here a validation for if medicine ID, or if ever the medicine ID contains a value, that's only the time that it is going to get the medicine details. Why? Because at page load, it is possible the medicine ID has no value. So it is going to return an error if ever we're going to go directly with this one here. Okay, so once the user clicks on the medicine select or combo box, drop down box, and selected a value, this is going to trigger. Okay, so what it is going to do, it is going to get medicine details. Okay, so everything actually is going to happen here for the side effects. Okay, so we could get then, and as you could see on our side effect, we have here the medicine ID as our parameter. Or actually, we could use this one directly there, but I just created here a parameter so that that is going to be retrieved from our database. Okay, so we have here get medicine details, and in our JSON we're going to ask for the medicine ID. So select asterisk from TBL medicines where ID is equal to the ID. Okay, so if ever we are going to have here, so we are going to return all, okay, columns. So it could be the name, the price, the ID, and so on. Okay, so once it has been retrieved, so the next thing that we're going to do is set price. Okay, so we have here the price. Okay, so we're going to set the price to response. Okay, I have already discussed why we are using 0 or the index into our response data here. Okay, so you already know that. Okay, oh no, we have it here. Okay, so that's for the price and for the amount. Okay, so we're just going to have the quantity which is already inputted by the user and the price that has been obtained from here. Actually, I have here some double operations. We could just actually put them here directly, but anyway, I am going to save for still the price and this one here. Okay, then for the details, okay, because what I'm doing here is so that the price and the amount here, the price here and the amount will be updated. So that is why we have the set price and the set amount. Again, what I was telling is that if ever you are not going to have the price and amount here, let go of the set price and set amount. Okay, just go directly with the details. Okay, so what I'm doing here then here is I'm creating here a row, an object, okay, an array that is going to contain the med ID, med name, quantity, price, and the amount. Okay, this is the list, okay, for my details. Okay, so I get the medicine ID, then the name, okay, quantity, price, and the amount. Then I added that new row into our list. Okay, so I know we have already discussed this one. So already know. So this row, the row that has been defined here, will be added into our details list. Okay. So next is okay. Take note, this one here changes the value of details list. And once every time the value of the details list changes, we must have to compute for the total. So that is why I have created another side effect Okay, we have here with my dependency as my details list. Okay, so every time the details list is going to change, we're going to compute for the invoice total. Okay, so how are we going to compute for the invoice total? So you have it here. We used here our reduce function. Okay, so again, current item, we have already discussed this one here. So next is I'm going to assign then set invoice total into my set invoice total with the newly computed total. Okay, so I think that's all. Okay, now the next thing, okay, the user is going to keep on selecting any of the items here. So the next thing that is going to do is to submit the whole invoice. Okay, so how are we going to submit? So I have here an invoice.php. That is going to process, okay, the data submitted from the client, in which it would be in a header detail format. So here we have also a different way on performing such. Okay, so but first we are going to define our JSON here. Okay, again, just like the other examples that we have, JSON, we are going to have here our JSON data. But in this example that we have, we are going to have a header detail. Okay, so therefore I'm going to have a header, then I'm just going to call it header, then a detail, I'm going to call it detail. Okay, so as easy as this one here. But take note, our header contains what? Okay, so for our header is I'm going to have the patient ID. So we're going to have the patient ID. This patient ID here is the one that we're going to submit into our that is going to be looked upon by the PHP. This patient ID here is we have that patient ID, the invoice date, and the invoice total. Okay, patient ID, then date, we have the invoice date, and total for invoice total. Okay, so this is for our header, and our detail is actually the details list. Okay, so console.log, I'm just going to display JSON, my JSON data. Okay, so we are going to familiarize ourselves how this new JSON has been formatted. Okay, so I'm going to have the console. Okay, I'll click on submit. So you could see it there, we have header and detail. Okay, but the content of the header is another array. By the way, we have an array of two elements. What are the elements? So we have the header and the detail. Okay, so but then within the header we have an array of objects. Inside my detail we have another array. So it is an array within an array. Okay, so let's look at now our header. So we have our header is we have date, patient ID, and the total. Okay, it is an array. Then we have also here our uh, detail, which contains another array for each of the items or elements. Okay, so this is the content of my detail. Okay, so I click on that. So 0 element, then we have the details. Okay, the amount, medicine ID, diatabs for the mid name, price, and quantity. Okay, so we are actually submitting the name, but we are not going to use that into our database. Okay, so hopefully you have understood the difference with our previous examples, okay, with our JSON data here. Okay, and by the way, before submitting this one, we have here medicine ID. And take note, it is the details list that we have used for our display into our table. But we could not see the medicine ID. Because, as you could see here, we have no medicine ID. Because for the user, the medicine ID has no use for the user. But for the programmer, for us, so we could use that. But what I did here is just actually, I hide the medicine ID. So how are we going to hide that? I just use here a style, okay? Then display is equal to none for the header and the body. Okay? But it is there. Actually, it is possible that we are not going to put it here anymore. Okay? But then, just in case, you need to browse through the table and not on the list. So therefore, we have the ID still onto our table. Because you could actually work with the table or work with our list. In our case, we are working with the list. Okay. So, we have now our data. So, next is, since we are going to save, so therefore we are going to use a post. So, new form data. Then, form data dot append apps no that append. So we're going to have our operation. I think it's save invoice. Wait. Okay, we have save invoice. Okay. And the other is we're going to have our JSON, in which that's our JSON data. But then we're going to JSON.stringify so that it could be encoded into JSON format. Okay. So next is we have response is equal to await accus. Then we're going to have our URL, which is URL, the one that is being defined here. Okay. Oops. Then our method, which is post, and our data. These are form data. Okay. So next is we are going to validate if response.data is equal to 1. Okay, we're just going to have again either 1 or 0. Okay. Then alert, you have successfully a new invoice. Okay. Then else, okay. So again, we have no error trapping or whatsoever. Okay, checking for data validation. Okay, so again, as you can see, we have the same algorithm with our previous examples except for our JSON data. Okay. So next is we are going to define now our API. Okay, so I have here my save invoice. Okay, save invoice. So this would be our the function that is going to work with our submitted invoice. Okay, so take note here. We have header and detail. Okay, so first is we are going to extract the values into our header and detail. So how are we going to extract? Okay, so that you could see. Okay, so that it will be clear. Oops. Okay, I'm going to display here the response that data, or the response that we could get from our where it is, from invoice.php. Okay, so I'm going to echo before going to the code. Okay, it is going to return our JSON. Okay, the data that we have submitted. Okay, so we have submit. Oh, I have an error. We have operation. Why error? Oh, it's operations. Okay, save. Okay, submit. So we have here, so this now comes from our API. So still we get the same format. So the content of the JSON is only the detail and the header. Okay, so take note, this comes from our API. Okay, that is page 83. Okay, it is now the response. Okay, so from our PHP, we must have to get the detail and the header. Okay, so how are we going to extract the values? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a variable for the header. Okay, so I get the header here, then I'm going to have the detail is equal to JSON, then detail. Oops. Okay, I'm going to return the header. Let's try. Submit. Oops, I have an error again. String conversion errors. I'm going to have JSON encode, because as I've said, the header is an array. Submit, save it there. We get now only the date, patient ID, and the total. Okay, so if ever I'm going to have my detail, okay, I'm going to return the detail. Take note, we are on the PHP, and we are displaying the return value into our JS. Submit. So you can see we have 4 arrays. Okay, so meaning we are going to save this into our what's that? Invoice master. Okay, so here, save patient ID, date, and the total, and the details here into our invoice detail. Okay, so I hope you understand very well the structure of our data. Okay, so but take note here that we are working with more than one table. Okay, so what will happen is that there is a possibility that why okay, I could save on the first table, but there would come an error on my next table. So therefore, the integrity of the data that we have recorded is not good. Okay? There's no data integrity, I mean. Okay? Why? Because we have not completed the recording of the records. Okay? So that is why we have with PDO, we have this what we call as transactions. Okay? So meaning, if ever we have already saved on the first table, and while saving on the second table, an error occurs, it is going to roll back whatever changes made into this table. Or if ever there is an error here, it is not going to save anymore into our details table. Okay? So how are we going to do that? So first, we're going to have here a try-catch statement. Okay? So we have the try. I know you're already familiar with the try. Then we have the catch. And in our catch, we are going to have here, we must have to return a PDO exception. With this exception, an error. Okay? And it is going to return 0. Okay? And in our try, okay, so we are going to perform the save operation here, and if ever it is already there is no error that happens here, we are going to issue the command commit. Okay, commit meaning it is now going to write into the database. Okay, but if ever it is not going, there will be an error. We are going to we have the rollback. Roll back. Okay. So again, if there are no errors, it is going to commit. But if ever there is an error, it will go to catch. Then it is going to roll back whatever changes has been previously made. Okay. But then, before you could commit or you could roll back, oh wait. Okay. Before you could commit or roll back, first you must issue the command con then begin transaction. Okay? So meaning, from here up to here, this is our transaction. And it's going to end only either on a commit or a rollback. Okay? So, I'm just going to copy, I have already copied, so that it is will not going to take us very long. So I copied now. How are we going to save into our header or our master? So insert into TBL invoice master. Okay, the ID, date, and the total with patient ID and so on. And as you could see, I used before we have the head. So we are going to use the header. Okay. So from the header, I have now assigned their values into our patient ID, date, and total. Okay? Those values comes from the header. And if ever there is no error, again, I'm going to copy. Okay, I'm going to put it here. Okay. Now, if ever there are no errors, so take note. For example, in that example there, so we have now a 3, then we have, I think, okay, let us say David, and so on. Okay, so we have now the newly added increment, auto increment value, and this value then is going to be saved into the details. Okay, so there are 4, so therefore we're going to have 3, 3, 3, 3. Okay, and the details. Okay, so how are we going to get the newly added auto increment? Okay, so a bit here. Get the newly added auto increment to be used in the details table. So we have the method last insert ID. Okay, so we have inserted it here. Okay, so then to get the newly added value for the auto increment primary key is we have last insert ID. That would be then the new ID. Okay, that's the time that we are then going to save into our details. Okay, so if your details skill statement, insert into. By the way, so that you could just have one double quotes here. Okay, but I just separated them here. Then now, since there are 4 right here, there are 4 items. Okay, so therefore we are going to iterate through each of the items here. Okay, so that's why you could see here we have a for each statement. We have defined and prepared our statement once, then execute 4 times in this case. Okay, so for each detail, in the detail as rows, or assign a variable row for each of the item. So we have here the invoice ID. Okay, there is the new ID. Get from there. Then the med ID, we have medicine ID, comes from row. We have that row med ID. Where does this come from? So we have the med ID. So we have it here. Med ID. We don't have a med name. Next is we have quantity, price, and amount. So we have quantity, price, and amount. Okay, so that's for our details. Okay, so next is if ever there are no errors, that's the time that we are going to commit and to let the calling function or calling client know what is the result. Then we are going to return 1. Okay, let's try. There are no errors. I'm going to edit first my JS. Okay, I'm not going to console. I'm going to have this one now. If there are no errors, you have successfully created a new invoice, or else error. Okay. Okay, John May Hasulan, and so on. Submit. You have successfully created a new invoice. Let us try to see if I think that was 13. So we're going to have the master. We have now the number 14. Patient number 1. Who is patient number 1? Okay, John May Hasulan. Okay, correct. So we have our master for John May Hasulan, and take note of the newly added auto increment. So we have 14. This is our primary key. So therefore, into our details, it should contain 4 14s. Invoice detail. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we have added the 4 records. Okay, so let us say I'm going to refresh, but I don't have any refresh here yet, so I'm going to change. I'm going to try another record. I just refreshed this page. Okay, so I'm going to have MACUs, then still on the 5, Viagra for MACUs. So I'm going to have 2 diatabs. Okay, 130. Submit. Successfully created. So this is the table for the details. Therefore, there will be two number 15 to be added now. Okay, 115, and we have next is we have another record for 15. And into our master is we have 15. Okay. So on the next video, I'm going to show you then how are we going to return a master detail from the API into our Next.js application. Okay, because what we are doing now is from Next.js sending it to the API. So next would be from the API, if ever that we're able to retrieve, let us say, an invoice. Okay, so from the PHP or from the API, go return it back to our Next.js application. Okay. So I hope that is clear to you, and that's all for this video.